Hey guys, and welcome back to the third episode of How to Code in Python for Absolute Beginners. This tutorial is sponsored by Super Practical Company, as is the rest of the series, so be sure to show your support by hitting the subscribe button and hitting the like button on this video. Thank you. So now that we have the shameless plug out of the way, let's get back into the actual code and the content for this video. So here's the program that we ended with our last episode, and so now we're going to talk about conditional execution. So let's just recap a little bit about what we did last episode. Last episode we created a very basic program, and we talked about global variables, local variables, talked about how to print the variables or the strings / numbers stored inside of the variable, and we basically figured out how to use the print command in Python without needing any extra libraries or additional information. So what is conditional execution? Now that might seem like a big word that's very difficult to understand, and you're just sort of creeping back a little bit like, this might not be for me. Well, don't worry about it. Conditional execution basically gives your program more power to do more operations and functions. So basically what that means, so before we dive into the actual way we incorporate conditional execution, let's talk about conditional operators, or what the way we need to know them as is Python operators. So basically this means like how you do subtraction, addition, multiplication, division, and everything like that in Python. Now this might seem very trivial to you, like, I know how to do this, why do I need to know how to do this? Well, in Python and in many other languages, you have different syntax. And syntax basically like different ways you write your code. And so Python has the least amount of syntax variables, and so you need to know exactly what operators you need, such as Boolean operators or anything like that, in order to run your code or actually write your code. So let's talk about Boolean operators first. Boolean operators are very simple operators. It's true or false. That's it. So basically, we can set Boolean equal to, so as we recall from last episode, this is our variable name. We're using the single equal sign to assign that variable something. And so we're going to assign it to true. Okay, fair enough, right? It's very simple. So it's the same thing. So basically true means that if anything is ran in that specific command, and if it's true, then the code will run. If it's false, then it won't run. So that means you have to have both. I'm just label it as Boolean 1. We're going to call it false. So it's basically the same thing. Stupid. There we go. All right. So it's basically the same thing as saying, okay, if there's code underneath true, then basically we need to run that whenever the command is true. If it's false, then we run whatever's underneath here. And that's the gist of conditional execution, basically. It's basically parameters you're giving to the program in order to run your code. So in order to do multiplication, for example, let's do print 5 plus 5. And now, basically, this is simple. You add using the plus sign, correct? But make sure you have a space between both the two integers that you are trying to add, I guess. I can't think of the name right now, but I'm assuming it's add. Addition. I don't know. Anyway, my brain's not working right now. But so, let's run this. Let's go to our handy dandy command prompt. Let's go to desktop. And then let's go to our projects folder. Oh, no. That's a different folder. Go to Python test folder. And now, if you guys remember, you can use dir to see what's inside our folder. And that will be the hello world.py. So in order to run it, Python hello world.py. Let's see if this works. As you can see, it printed hello world, just like we have over here. And then it printed Bob, because we are printing the variable, which is storing Bob. And then it printed 10, because you did 5 plus 5, which is 10. Now, if you can't do basic math, I think you're going to have a hard time understanding how to code. Coding is pretty much math at its core. So let's erase these variables real quick. We could leave the hello world, leaves a little fancier. We're just going to mess around with the operators, and I'll teach you guys the rest of the operators. Excuse me. So the next operator we're going to learn about is multiplication. So multiplication is fairly easy. You can do the same thing we just did, just change it to an asterisk. An asterisk on most numeric keyboards is usually on the numpad next to the subtraction and in between the subtraction and division symbols, or it can be done through Shift 8 on a non-numpad keyboard. So an asterisk, a single asterisk, means that you are doing 5 times 5. So if we run this again, we got to save it, run, give us 25. There we go. Alrighty, so now you guys know how to multiply and add. Now how about subtract? Do we know how to do subtraction? Do you think it's this? Let's see what it gives us. Yes, sir, it is. Yes, sir, or ma'am, sorry. It is 0, and that's because you're using a single subtraction symbol. Operators in Python are very simple. Once you get into, they're generally the same, but some languages, for example, of C or C++, they have tiny bit of variation, such as any C variation has no Booleans, so you basically have to tell it the exact command that you want it to do, and that's a little more difficult. And Python is just very simple. It's very English. It's very correlated to the English language pretty easily, and so yeah. Now let's talk about division. Division, as I just mentioned earlier, is basically the slash symbol. And that's it, really. Now, don't confuse this for the backslash, because the backslash will just nullify anything after that. As you can see here in red, do not use the backslash. There we go. And so now we have 5 divided by 5, and that should be 1.0, because whenever it's divided, the Python interpreter, or the idle, as most people call it, it gives it to an exact tenth of a digit. And so if you want it to be more, you could specify that, but that specification is never needed, because Python will automatically have specification, especially after the update of 3.2. And so if you're running anything higher from the 3.2, you will be in good shape. So you don't have to worry about that. So now we've covered addition, multiplication, subtraction, and division. Now what else is there? Well, now we need to just know how to use these commands through variables and if-else statements. So I'm just going to erase this, and this brings us back to the second tutorial episode. If you guys didn't catch that, you should go back and watch it before continuing with the rest of this series, because that is a very fundamental part of what you're going to need to know in order to code with Python. So let's get started. So first off, we're going to create a variable. I'm just going to name it my variable, and we're going to set it equal to, how about, let's do some big numbers, 100 times 100. Now we just need to print it. So let's print my variable. Alrighty, save it, put it in, and run it. And that gives us, what is this, 10,000? Yes, it's 10,000. I'm sorry, I can't see all these zeros. Alright, so now we know how to use these. So basically you can interchange the conditional execution, the conditional parameters, as any way you want. So now let's get into if-else statements. So if-else statements are very handy for doing multiple blocks of code and running specific things for certain answers that the machine gives you, or that the person who's running your code gives you. So let's just do a very simple program. So let's call this ask underscore name. We're going to assign it something. And we're going to use the input command. Now the input command, I don't think I've talked about this yet, but the input command basically tells Python to wait for an answer from the user to type in something in the console or wherever you are using this. So basically it's asking for input. And so we can put anything we want inside the parentheses. So let's ask what is your name? And if you guys like the whole single spaced little thing, you could leave a space, or you could just do \n, and that'll run everything as a new line. It'll make the input box a new line. I'll show you what I mean right now. So we got running it. As you can see, it ran both of them on separate lines because it's two different commands. But now that we included the \n, it moved our input line to the bottom or to the next line. So that's where we can start typing stuff in. So right now, if we just type in Bob, won't do anything. It'll just exit the program because there's no code after that. Okay, now what if we said if ask_name was equal to, now notice how I'm assigning ask name equals, so two equal signs, because the two equal signs means that it needs to be exactly that value or that string or that word or that name or letter or anything after that has to be exactly what has been inputted. This single basically assigns something. Double equal signs basically says, okay, if 5 is equal to 5, then do this code. Or if Bob is equal to Bob, then do this code. This is basically what the double equal sign means. Now, the way we start writing an if-else statement is you start by writing if, so just read it normally from left to right, if this, the input from this question, is equal to, let's do Bob. If it's equal to Bob, now you have to do Python syntax, so it's just a colon, very simple, that's it. Then you press enter. It'll tab you automatically and it will jump you down to a new line. So now you write in what you want to run once someone says that, okay, ask's name is equal to Bob. So let's say print, let's do hello Bob, and now we have to include an else statement. So if anything else is indicated there, for example, else, and you press enter, you also have to include a colon there as well. That's the syntax right there. It's very simple. You only need to worry about 2 colons in this entire if-else statements structure. So basically what we do for the else statement, we can write anything we want. It'll be the same thing as the if statement except with no condition. So if this condition is not met, then everything under else will run. If this condition is met, then everything under if will run. Make sense? It's not too difficult once you understand the basic concept of if-else statements. It will generally be the same throughout any other programming language. So let's see. Else, okay, so if the name does not equal Bob, let's do print hello. Oh, forgot my quotes. Not Jello, hello, comma. We're going to do a space, and then we're going to add, and then we're going to type in the variable name. And so basically what this does is it shows hello, comma, and then it'll input whatever name that was given in the original question. So now that we say that, let's try this program out. So hello world, what is your name? Let's try running the if statement, and it'll say hello Bob, exactly what we wanted to do. Now let's run it again and type in Jerry. Hello Jerry, exactly what we wanted it to do. Now that's a very basic concept of how if-else statements work. You give the if part of the statement a parameter or something that you want it to have or need to be true in order to execute this code. And then you need to include an else statement to say that, okay, if this condition is not met, then run this code instead. And so that's basically what you're trying to tell it to do. If you want the user to do something specific or you want them to be led to a different route in your code, then you can use if-else statements to reroute them. So let's make this a little bit more complicated. How about we do if ask name? What if someone does? Okay, let's try this here. Oops. Ugh. I added a backslash by accident. All right. Now, what if someone does Bob in all caps without knowing? It'll just run it as hello Bob, right? But we don't like that. That's a very bad looking syntax. I don't like that. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do this. So in order for them to be considered Bob, we're going to do if, we're going to change the variable to input dot lower is equal to that, then it will run that. So for example, let's do this again. Let's do all caps Bob. Oh, it didn't run. Why? It ran after that because you need the input requires an extra enter sign. Now that is a little bit weird, but you'll get used to it if you're running certain codes. You can fix this problem without including this statement at all if you only want certain things to be omitted, for example. For example, if you just want like Bob, or if you can use the OR statement to add even more parameters for this code to be ran, and if you don't want the OR statement, you can also use the AND statement. So basically the difference between AND and OR you should have learned in grade school, but I'll teach it to you again as a crash course. AND basically means that both of these conditions have to be met in order to run this, which is not plausible, but it will run. Now if you use OR, that means that either this or this has to be met in order to run this. If neither this or this was ran, then it will run this. Makes pretty good sense, right? Yeah, I think so. So now that you know about if-else statements, and you know how to ask the user to input information into the variable and how to incorporate that information into a statement and how to print stuff, etc. Next episode, we're going to be learning about functions, creating functions, incorporating variables, and basically incorporating everything that we've been taught so far into a function. And then after you've learned about functions, we're going to do a mini project or a mini exam or whatever you want to call it, where it's basically going to be a very simple text-based adventure game where we'll incorporate functions and we'll integrate if-else statements, we'll define variables, declarations, conditional execution, etc., etc. So basically in that mini project, we're going to be combining all the fundamental skills you've learned in Python so far, which are basically the necessities and the backbone of writing anything in Python. We will incorporate into an actual project. And then after that, we're going to move on to some more complicated stuff that includes while loops, for loops, anything else, importing libraries, using random functions, arrays, using more arithmetic ways or conceptualized ways. So stay tuned for the next episode, guys. I hope you really enjoy this episode and you now know how to write and construct your own if-else statements. So tinker around, write your own code, use this as a template if you want, and then just go on from there, change it up, run it around, impress your friends if you want, be like, hey, I know how to do this now. So just do anything you want, and now you also know how to add whatever specific input you were given into the print function. So that's also something I didn't mention before. So now you know how to do that as well. So stay tuned for the next episode, guys. Leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel for more content. Thank you. See y'all next episode.